This evening, we have the honor of having with us Jason Mayden. Jason Mayden, in his previous role at Nike, oversaw the design and execution of all conceptual products, data-driven innovations, and inline lifestyle and performance product for Jordan Brand as the Senior Global Design Director. During his 13-plus year career at Nike, Mayden led and contributed to the creation of innovative sport performances products for athletes and cultural icons such as Carmelo Anthony, Russell Westbrook, Derek Jeter, and North Carolina's very own Chris Paul, and arguably the greatest basketball player of all times, Michael Jordan. Y'all have to agree, all right? In 2011, Mayden successfully received his master's in general management and social innovation from Stanford University's Graduate School of Business, and shortly thereafter, he returned to Nike as the Global Director of Innovation for Nike Digital Sport, where he was responsible for the strategic investigation of new technologies and services such as Nike Fuel Band. Currently, Mayden is the CEO and co-founder of Superheroic, a business and movement focused on their mission to entertain, surprise, and delight every child in the world through imaginative and interactive physical play, an idea that he was able to incubate as the first design in resident at Accel Partners. Additionally, Mayden is a fellow and media designer at the Hasso Plattner Institute of Design at Stanford University, a frequent lecturer at Stanford University's prestigious Graduate School of Business, and an advisory board member to his undergraduate alma mater, the College for Creative Studies. Let's all welcome Jason Mayden.
Thank you. Appreciate the introduction. How you guys doing? You guys well? I'm in North Carolina. How you doing? All right. This is a place that is near and dear to my heart because I spent a lot of time here with Chris Paul and MJ and several other folks. So thank y'all for welcoming me back because honestly, it's one of my favorite states. So I'm delighted to be here. Let me get the presentation set up and we can jump right in. All right. So I am Jason Mayden, and as Tiffany mentioned, I have spent various parts of my life doing various things in different industries. What I'm here to speak with you today is about the new rules of entrepreneurship and the new rules of understanding, I would say, what we would call our audience members or consumers. So something I like to put out first is all the various titles I've held throughout my career, because naturally I'm a polymath, which means I have very different interests that all align in one singular effort. So first and foremost, the things that matter to me are highlighted in white. At the top is I'm a believer. I don't hide my faith. I tell people everywhere I go that is exactly why I'm successful. Not meaning to offend anyone, but that's just naturally what I believe for myself. At the bottom are the jobs I can't fail at, being a husband and a father. Everything in between is stuff that I've done and is giving me an advantage in my industry. So I was a lawn care technician, and what that meant is I shoveled snow and I cut grass on the south side of Chicago to make money and buy shoes. Unfortunately, I didn't realize that I had seasonal allergies and I hated the cold. So imagine being a kid and you're sneezing and you're wondering, like, how am I going to sustain this momentum? So what I did is I employed my friends. That was my first entrepreneurship endeavor, was basically buying Jordans by cutting grass. Secondarily, I became a mover. What was interesting about this role is I was a mover and a janitor. So when you're with people and you're seeing the artifacts of their existence, you understand that objects and stories are interconnected. What people accumulate throughout their lives is a reflection of where they've been and who they love. So when you're sitting with the person who, oh no worries, want me to talk? Say hello to them? When you're sitting with the person and they're explaining to you, why they're packing up. They received a job offer or their loved one passed away. It's a humbling experience because you realize our job as people is to listen and display empathy and reflect that back in the craft of design. At least that's my discipline. After that, I became a barber for undergrad because I needed to sustain my own lifestyle, living and going to art school. After giving up an academic scholarship and football scholarship to Georgia Tech, I decided to transition over to go to art school. What's interesting about being a bald barber is like being a dentist with bad teeth. Like, you have to constantly explain to people why you're bald. I'm like, look, man, it's genetics. It's not that I messed my haircut up. It just happened on its own. Same thing, when people are sitting in the chair and you're speaking with them, you build a relationship. It's trust, and it's a mutual trust that's exchanged between the person cutting your hair and then the person, who's actually in your care in that moment. Same thing, I would ask questions. I would learn about people and hear about places I should visit and gain insights that would allow me to be a better designer. Then I became Nike's first design intern that was African American. Now, this was fascinating for me, considering that every athlete most likely looked like me, but there wasn't people who created on their behalf that looked like me. And I wanted to understand why. People often talk about in new venture creation or in small business ownership or entrepreneurship that there's a pipeline, problem. It's not a pipeline problem. I travel the world. I see tons of women and people of color that have opportunities, but what they don't have is the vocabulary of entrepreneurship. That's really what it comes down to, is how you explain yourself. Some of the terminology, some of the websites, some of the books. Once you master the language, then you can participate in the game. So that's really what it all comes down to. It's not a void of information or intelligence. It's a void of vocabulary. So that helped me to develop the vocabulary when I became an intern. Then I became a full-time designer at Nike, which was my dream since I was a kid. I had the good fortune of being in a rotational program where I did everything from logos for athletes to business strategies to looking at inefficiencies with supply chain, using creativity as the catalyst for investigation. So one thing I tell people is, they say, I can't draw, I can't be creative. Drawing does not make you creative. Drawing is drawing. Creativity is curiosity, is question asking. All of us can learn to ask questions. But unfortunately, some of us are told that creativity is not an economically viable outcome for our career. That's inaccurate. That's completely inaccurate. And so I tell people it's not a difference between you and I when I speak about creativity. It's just I keep asking questions. That's my job. So all of us can be more creative by the questions we ask. Then I became the youngest executive at Nike after 5 years and went from intern to senior, which was fascinating considering that I didn't remember most of my journey. I had been so fascinated on getting to the destination, I wasn't present in the moment. And when I finally got into the room, the magical room that everyone talks about, and that magical table, I realized that there was no substance there. What I had been looking for was actually in my journey, not in the destination. So I don't know if you're fans of the book, The Alchemists, but everyone has a personal legend. Everyone has a journey. But so many of us are in a rush to get to the outcome instead of looking at the steps, because that's what excellence truly is. Small things done well consistently over time. It's not the one thing you do well, it's all the little things that you do well. And so I took a break, went to grad school. Most people take breaks and don't work. I actually took a break and applied to Harvard and Stanford at the same time, which my wife still looks at me like, when did you sleep? But I ended up going and getting accepted to the business school, and I wanted to understand how people will tell me no in the future. My strategy in life is to eliminate the way people can tell me no. I am very introspective. I do an inventory of my own gaps and weaknesses, and I say, how do I either partner with someone that has it as a strength or turn that into a strength for myself? Because if you know how people will tell you no by being critically, open to your own personal feedback, then you're able to strategize and bias towards that yes. So I do that every year. I look at myself and what I'm doing, and I say, how would I shut myself down? So that's what business school allowed me to do. Ended up working as a designer in residence at a venture capital firm. So a lot of what I'm doing today is a result of that research and that experience. Venture capital is one method of funding a business. Some people do it just by bootstrapping, which is their own funds. Some people do it through loans, private equity. I chose venture capital because it wasn't as expensive as some of the other methods. And because I had the relationships, I was able to speak the vocabulary, which made it more likely for me to raise venture money. So when you guys are building out your economic kind of ecosystem, it's about the various ways people can get funded. Because if you have a monopoly in how the money and the capital is deployed, then you can control the pipeline. And once again, people pick people who they normally are comfortable with. So the first 5 people that you've called in your phone are gonna basically look like the people you're gonna fund. So if you don't have a diverse group of friends and peers, your capital is not gonna be deployed in a diverse way. And that's the part of entrepreneurship I try to share with people. Then I became a founder and started Super Heroic, and here we are today. So the one thing I wanna talk about is in this new economy, we have to think about this terminology of total addressable market. That means all of us. Everybody in here is a potential audience member of someone's product or service. But when you think about how you create those businesses or how you hire and how you train people, you have to realize that we're at a complete moment of singularity where human potential and computing potential have overlapped. So now people have more access to information than ever before. And so you can't necessarily predict where a person is from. Someone in Brazil and Chile can be getting influence from New York, buying clothes from Japan, eating food from Paris. How do you prepare for that? So we call them cultural alchemists. People who extract things from culture, mix it together like an alchemist would, and then put out something that's pure and something that's real for them. those are the employees of the future. Those are people who will start businesses. Those are people who will run countries and organizations because they have access to more inputs than we ever had. So when you're thinking about your audience and how you want to serve them, you have to realize that it's not just you, it's the whole world that's trying to get their attention. It used to be just your competitors. But how do you compete with every single distraction? It's with trust, authenticity, and transparency. Because if you can say it in public, then consumers believe that that's what you're saying in the room when you're making these decisions on their behalf. It's why companies are being exposed in the media, because what they do internally does not reflect their external ethos and their brand positioning. So you have to fundamentally be exactly the same, whether someone's looking or someone's not. There's no longer the affordability of having a PR person smooth things over. Like, people can investigate and find out your supply chain. They can investigate and find out your best practices, your employee practices. So why try to hide something? Just always tell the truth. That's the best strategy. Because cultural alchemists, they're very attuned with what's happening in the world. And how we describe them based on our research is that they're contextually educated, which means that the traditional institutions like universities are no longer just the path to acquire knowledge. They learn by doing. I can go to YouTube University and learn anything, right? That's the beauty of today's student, today's founder. They can teach themselves. They don't have to be taught. So now there's a complete disparity in who owns the information and then who can use the information. It's flat. Only thing I can't give you is hustle. You have to have that on your own. It's true. People are like, why do I learn how to hustle? Like, I can't, man. Either you're hungry or you're not. It's one of the two. Like, there's no in between. Multiracial, and the reason I point this out is because we're living at this moment where everyone is blending, whether it be culturally, whether it be physically in relationships, or whether it be how they move and how they naturally navigate the world. People are more aware than ever of their ethnicity and their gender and what they stand for and what they believe in. And so when you're bringing new businesses to market, you have to be authentic with who you are, because people are now for the first time being very confident in being authentically themselves. They're methodically creative, socially aware, culturally blended, and technologically proficient. They are driven by genuine interactions, exchanges of ideas, collective aspirations, and access to experiences that lead to meaningful opportunities. They are not just looking for a job, they're looking for a mission and a purpose. They are champions of the future. So it used to be a stigma when people say, oh, I want to follow my passion. And then people say, what does that mean? Like, do what makes you the most money, not what's passionate. But now, because of benefit corps and different structures that exist, people can have double bottom line return companies. So you don't have to choose between an NGO and a for-profit. You could do both. But you have to be very strategic in what it is you're serving and making sure that you're consistent. So it's a game of chess. It's no longer checkers. The old capitalistic model was checkers. The person with the most resources win. Now it's the persons with the most efficiency. Speed is the difference maker. So if you're fast, you can win. It's not if you're big. And you see that now with some of these large companies that are being disrupted by teams of 11 people versus an 11,000 person organization. It's happening daily because speed is the number one thing that will advance any culture or society in today's world. And so what they crave is inspiration and relevance. The reason these two are desperately needed is because pressing that button on social media creates an artificial stimulant. It's the same as someone telling you in person, I love you, when you get a like. So when you get that dopamine fix on social media, it's really, really hard to encourage a person that gets that 100 times per day. You have to cut through the noise, because that's the cognitive relationship that technology has now damaged. The things we use now control how we feel. That's crazy. And the algorithms know that. This is as a person who studied behavioral psychology, this is like the golden era in manipulation of intent. So you have to now be inspirational, on purpose, and very transparent and authentic. It doesn't matter if you're selling insurance or if you're selling shoes. If it's not authentic, if it's not telling a story, they will not listen. Storytelling is critical for survival. That's what leads to relevance. What are you selling me? What are you giving me? And how does it apply to my life? How does it make my day easier? Everyone is looking for efficiency gains because we're overburdened with work, with emails, with busyness. So if you provide efficiency, then you provide value. And that value is scalable. So any business should be able to say, I can get you from A to B in one simple step. Frictionless commerce is what we call it in Silicon Valley. How can you create a frictionless experience? And what they can become is innovators and entrepreneurs. The word innovation has been overused. Innovation used to only be given to people who were Nobel laureates and people who were getting, breakthroughs in science and technology. Now people are being called innovators for simply changing the color of a t-shirt. It's like, that's it? That's all? Like, you didn't solve cancer? No, man, my t-shirt, I changed it pink. Wow, bro. Like, and so you have to understand, we've used that word so much, we've forgotten what it truly means. It's the exploration and discovery of new frontiers. It's not the response. It's not the education system we live in today, which has trained our children to be basically driven through rote memorization and taking a test. We need to prepare our children to ask questions and discover, because they're going to have to survive in an economy where 90% of the jobs they'll occupy don't exist today. And that's in the next 7 years. So imagine being a child in 8th grade, and by the time you get to college, there's jobs that you didn't even know could exist, but you're already your junior year in college and going down one path, one discipline, and now you're unemployable. That's what's happening with our economy. That's what's happening with the way we've raised our children in an education system. So we have to prepare them to be question askers, because they're going to be the ones defining the new frontier. And we do this through a process called immersive empathy. So this is a combination of forensic psychology, so crime scene analysis, CSI stuff. You study the environment, you learn behavioral triggers, and then method acting. So put to use, the best case example of that was how I would work with athletes. I would mirror their behaviors, their travel schedule, their dietary habits, their frustrating moments. I would try to replicate every single thing about their existence to understand how they make decisions and transform from who they are to who the crowd expects them to be. That's insanely hard, but it gave me a unique insight into why athletes compete, because we love them, we praise them, but imagine that every time you walk out of your house, you have to live up to a highlight. People expect you to be perfect every time they see you. LeBron can't have a day off. Derek Jeter can't have a day off because I heard about you once. Now I can afford to go to a Yankees game, hit a home run, Derek. Get a turn too, Derek. Like, break a record, Derek. It's like, nah, I don't feel like it. So I had to give them this thing that will help them transform from their regular selves to their exemplar selves. So that immersive empathy helped me to give certain details and certain colors and certain textures that when they looked at it, they were able to switch. And so this is the same thing with customers or your audience. You have to understand their why, not the what. Not what they do, not what they want to buy, not what they believe in, but why they believe in it. That inner innate feeling of why is so critical to be successful in today's world. So the process and the definition, something that we coined, is hands-on experience intended to enhance trust, scale authenticity, and strengthen a designer's ability to identify and fulfill the unmet needs of their consumer. Whenever you're starting a new business, you are a designer. Do not let people tell you otherwise. I'm a highly accredited designer, and I will tell you, none of my degrees matter when it comes to starting a business, because when you do something from scratch, you are all creative people. Starting anything is a creative endeavor, not drawing. So when people say, oh, I'm not creative, stop. Just don't let the world tell you that, because we need more people to think creatively, because that's how we actually advance society. And so what it looks like in practice, and this is kind of like my nerd graph, so pardon me, this is it's my geek graph. It's in there, it happens. So a lot of people have heard probably about design thinking and human-centered design, and some of this terminology that's become pretty popular in modern business formation. But the reality is that scratches the surface. It doesn't tell you the why. It helps you to categorize the what. And so the why is really about these few pillars over here. You have to know the industry you're trying to disrupt, hyper bias towards action in terms of developing trust, and then lead with motivation. And the design process, meaning having your audience involved, and then direct user interaction and rapid prototyping. A vast majority of businesses are started without ever talking to their customers, which is wild to me, because we live in a digital age where people believe I can look at the data. The data doesn't tell the whole story. There are certain things that just cannot be captured with binary ones and zeros. There's just unpredictability to humanity that you can't categorize in that way. So you have to put yourself in their shoes, like literally sometimes physically be in their presence or be in their circumstances to understand them. And it sounds so simple, but you'll be surprised how many businesses I would see when I was in venture that would come through and tell me, I have this crazy idea for this audience and here's the market. And I'm like, well, how many of these people have you talked to? None. I did a Google poll. I'm like, you believe that people are giving you accurate information on a Google poll? I'm like, you gave them a $10 Starbucks card, bro. I would lie to you for $10 at Starbucks. I'll just say, yeah, just click, 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 click. And so people are building businesses with biased data. A good example of that is how some of the computer vision or camera technology in mobile phones has been created. There was a huge issue with an actual sport watch. I won't say which one it is, but it couldn't take the blood pressure and heart rate of people over a certain skin tone, because the people who developed the technology didn't account for the various skins that would be wearing it. That's a simple user study. Who will most likely buy this product? Who will most likely need this product? And so the pulse oximeter, the sensor, couldn't penetrate the density of the melanin in the skin. They raised $20 million and the business went out before it even shipped. And that was a mistake they could have solved by simply not going to their friends and say, hey, try this watch on, you think it's cool? But actually really thinking about the athlete, the trainer, the full spectrum of people they're serving. They only did a Google poll. So you try to see, like, you have to be on the ground nowadays. And so all this that I've learned has rolled up into becoming me. And what I say by me is more than society expected. I'm the child of an ex-military man. My mom and dad have been married since they were 13 and 14. I grew up on the south side of Chicago in a neighborhood that was a social experiment where they would segregate children into different groups and give some drugs and some not drugs and see how well we did throughout life. Like, this was a true thing for me. Fortunately enough, I had parents that advocated for me and said, there's nothing wrong with my child. He's not broken. He's just intelligent. Stimulate him in a different way. So the group of children I was a part of, we've all become professors and doctors and politicians and lawyers. And the other children, you can imagine what happened. And so coming out of Chicago, which is a city that is very tied to how policies are produced nationally, I understood that there's a certain way that I have to behave in the world in order to create value for others. And so my whole life has been about being a servant. And a true servant leader understands how to provide resources and information, not just money and protection, but resources and information. And so that's me. If you ever had any questions about me having hair, it was there. I told y'all it was magical. We had a lot of adventures. It was positive. But at this age of 7, I was faced with my own mortality. I was on my deathbed. I had what was called septicemia, which is a blood infection. And imagine being 7 years old and having people discuss your mortality in front of you. If he gets out the hospital, if he survives, if he's okay. So in that moment, I had to make a critical choice. Will I be defined by people's expectations and fear, or will I decide to live and be present in my own existence to be able to extract the value from myself that I knew I had? So at 7, I made a choice to live fully. And it's funny to say that, but I'm always thinking about 7-year-old Jason. Because at this moment, when I was sitting there and they were contemplating my life, I thought about 2 things. Easter celebration so I can get free gummy bears, which was true, and then going home and playing with my friends. So I just kept thinking, those are the 2 things that drive me, play, and then being around other people having these shared experiences in childhood education. So every decision I've made have all been driven by this one thing, my desire to play. All of us have one thing that simplifies our life existence, but we don't think of it that way because we live in a culture where it's cooler to have this/that/this. I tell people, I'm the son of Albert and Priscilla. That's it. All the other titles I can care less about. I focus on one thing, play. And so when I was younger, I used to play by putting my dream inside of sketches that I would do. This is a picture of my brother that I sketched when I was, I think, in 6th grade. And what's so funny is it says he's studying, but the books aren't open. My brother looked like an R&B singer from the 90s. So he had a very different childhood experience than I did. I was a nerd. I wanted to be a black Goonie. I was riding BMX and, I was fascinated by Japanese culture and comic books. I did not fit in on the south side of Chicago. My brother was 100% south side of Chicago. He had a line of, people trying to court him out the door. And so I just remember drawing and capturing his essence, but always putting my dream in the foreground. And that's a lot of what people don't understand. When you give your dream a deadline, it becomes a goal. So many people say, I want to be this when I grow up, but how many people have put action and a plan behind it? I said I wanted to work for Nike, so I consumed everything possible from calling their customer service line, literally, to their automated responses. This advertisement came out, I called, no one was on the other line, obviously, it was a recording, but then I flipped over the shoebox and it was the actual 503 area code to the campus itself. The first time I called, I had a high-pitched voice when I was younger, so they said, how can we help you, young lady? I'm like, oh man, you too? like y'all, I'm a boy, which was a funny thing to have to argue with the customer service rep at 11 over who I was. But I kept telling them, hey, I want to work at Nike. And they would engage in conversation and send me stickers. But then I saw someone's name, Tinker Hatfield. And I called and I said, Tinker's my uncle. And they couldn't tell me no because they didn't know if I was lying or not. They were like, wait, Tinker could be. It's one of those things. And so I used what I had to get what I wanted. I had information. Information is the only thing you truly need to succeed. When people say, how do you compete with the best? I've been around the world's best, brightest, and most wealthiest people on the planet. It's not their intelligence. It's their willing to endure when others quit. And they endure because they have more information, because they know what happens on the other side of persistence and perseverance is success. So you don't have to be smart and be from a big city to have the same spirit and hustle as a person from a big city and that has all these resources. You just have to be willing to endure, because entrepreneurship is lonely. It's a whole bunch of answers that you don't know how to get. That's improper English, but you get what I mean. You just sit around all day like, well, how do I make this decision without the proper information? When do I use intuition? When do I use mentors? So you have to be a little bit brave to ask for help, but a little bit crazy to go with no frontier in front of you. It's the unknown. And so that's why you have to persist by giving yourselves those moments to reach out to people who have done something in correlating experiences or adjacent industries that motivate you. So mine was calling Nike and harassing them until I just didn't go away. I said, I need a job. And so they kept sending me stuff until I was a kid, until I got to high school, and then rejected me several times in high school. But I was used to rejection because my brother, he was popular, I wasn't. So I was impenetrable with that. But I just persisted. But what was interesting is when I tell you guys about Chicago and what happened, so mind you, academically, I had a 4.2 GPA in high school. I was great. I was doing everything I needed to do. It wasn't because I was smart. It's just simply because no one talked to me. So I spent most of my time reading. I would crack jokes and draw pictures. I was short and I was always sick, and I'm mixed. So, it's one of those things where you don't fit in socially, so you become an observer of life. But at a certain point, I had to make some critical decisions. I needed to go to school. I needed to cross certain streets. And I had to decide, am I willing to physically fight to get an education? And I had to. So that picture there on the left, that's me. I look younger today than I did in that photo. And I was 17, I had transferred in my senior year, I gave up playing sports, I had saw tremendous amounts of destruction in my city, and I just honestly started to believe what people had told me about myself. Because there's this thing in positive psychology called possible selves. If you don't see someone, then you can't become that better version of yourself. Because people can only become what they see. So when I said I wanted to be a designer, the only example I had was Lucius Fox, a fictitious character in a Batman comic book. He was a black man who was the CEO of Wayne Enterprises, and he was a financier, an engineer, an innovator. And so I had a fictitious mentor, and I talked to him out loud and pretended that I would meet Lucius Fox someday. But when teachers would find out the reason why I would carry my Batman comic books, or they would, find out why I was drawing shoes, they would tell me, people like you don't go to XYZ schools. Without ever really looking at the evidence of my brilliance, they made a snap decision. So it's the same thing with opportunity. Sometimes founders or people who are doing something new, they may not look the part, but those are the exact people that will disrupt industries. Those are the exact people that can change the world. The people who are often just observers of it, but not participants because they either feel socially segregated or they feel small and insignificant. But that's a gift. It is a gift to be the underdog. So I didn't feel sorry for myself. I used my pain to push my passion. It became my purpose. So I wrote letters, saved my money. I showed up on Nike's campus on my own. Like, I flew out to Oregon by myself. Didn't even tell my parents until maybe like 3 years ago. They thought I was like taking a trip one weekend to college. I'm like, nah, man, I was at Nike. I showed up in Oregon. I walked around campus. I talked to everybody possible because I needed to touch the place. I needed to see that it was real. So I took a photo. This wasn't the photo I actually took. It's been damaged, but I came back and I posted the image on my ceiling in my dorm room. So every morning when I woke up, it was the first thing I saw. Before I went to sleep, it was the last thing I saw. I made my dream tangible. So when you have an idea, you need to have vision boards. It sounds fluffy, but no, it honestly gives you a different perspective on outcomes. If you don't put it down on paper, it's not real. And 99% of any creative endeavor is putting it into the world and willing it into existence. Nothing great happens by just hoping it happens. You have to make it happen. So this is step one, is making it happen by making it real. And then when I finally got there, I had the good fortune of meeting my hero. He was my Batman. So I was like, cool, he's bald, I'm bald, let's go. We had like bald Wonder Twin moment. But what was interesting is MJ is a better business person than he is athlete. And that sounds scary when you think about all that he's done in his career athletically. But he was methodical in how he made decisions. He taught me so much about the difference between a response and a reaction, how to be strategic, how to actually assess a threat in the market, how to turn my opportunities into things that can create momentum for others. But this phrase is the one that I carry with me the most, because I would often ask him, how can I succeed? How can I do well? And he would say, look, I can accept failure, but I can't accept you not trying. So he would encourage us to try, because there's no such thing as losing. It's only you win or you learn. But so many of us are afraid of making a mistake and being judged, but it doesn't matter, because your competition doesn't have the knowledge you have because you failed before them. So now you have the advantage once again that gives you speed. Because by the time they make that decision, you've already moved on to the next circumstance or the next experience or the next decision. So you have to be willing to try. That is 99% of anything. So many of us kill our dreams because we talk ourselves out of it. But you get one life. And I don't know about y'all, but I refuse to be mediocre in my lifetime. I want to do something important to serve and leave something behind for others. And that just comes down to trying. and being willing to be embarrassed in public sometimes if it don't work out. And so I had the good fortune of working with this gentleman. He's like a semi-truck with no brakes, going downhill on an icy slope. Like it's it's crazy to see his work ethic. You know, a lot of people think that Russell is driven through anger. He's not. He's competing with himself. It's not KD. It's himself in his mind. He talks to himself. When people say he's arguing and talk, it's literally he's arguing with himself because he knows his greatest enemy is his inner me. That's all of our biggest battle is our internal thinking. What we say to ourselves internally is how we show up in the world. So once we can master ourselves, then everything else is easy. So it's really about conquering yourself when you start any new endeavor, and specifically when you start a business. Then I had a good chance to work with a brawler. I went from basketballers to brawlers. And in a combat sport, you can't hide in the ring. Andre Ward is a legend, undefeated, retired, light heavyweight champion of the world. And imagine being in a sport where you can't run. It's just you. It's just you. There's no one to blame. There's no coach. It's just you. I watched him train. I saw the sacrifices, living in an apartment by himself for 3 months, away from his family, not seeing his wife and kids. Like, that's difficult. It's the same thing when you start a business. It's strategic sacrifices that you have to be willing to make, but it is a journey that your family needs to be co-pilots on, not just passengers. So when you start your business, don't think as your family and loved ones as passengers, just to be updated on your journey. Include them as co-pilots. Give them specific tasks. Hey, could you call me on Thursdays just to check in? Like, I give everybody in my family a task. Call me just to see how I'm doing. Or, hey, on this day, can you just send me an encouraging text? Because I don't know how I'm going to feel that day, but it'd be nice to receive something random. Because what happens when you start something, everyone starts to request your time or want something from you. So how can you give to the world and to yourself at the same time? It's hard. You end up losing. You become drained. It's why so many businesses fail. Not because they run out of capital. It's because the founders get fatigued. People don't talk about founder fatigue because as you're building and your star is rising, people say, oh, let me attach. I need this. I need this. So you have to have strategic filters, ways to say no, but also people to give you those moments of unexpected joy. So look at your peer group as moments of unexpected joy. Send me a text. Send me an image. Give me something to keep me going on my journey. And that's something I learned from Andre watching him train for fights. And then, once again, I'm a geek, so data somehow pops up in my life. We started to look at how we were innovating and asking ourselves, are we doing the right thing for the athletes? Because the game has changed, but the way we innovate hasn't. And so this was a huge project where we pulled every data point from the history of professional basketball. One, to prove that Michael's the greatest of all time. So with Tiffany, he is empirically proven from a data perspective to be a statistical anomaly. There's never been a Michael Jordan. There'll never be one. So this chart, this is the normal neighborhood you want to live in, two-way all-star. So LeBron, Kobe, MJ's over here by himself, like literally by himself. There are 13 styles of play, 10 that we focus on. MJ mastered every single style of play. So if you're into martial arts, imagine being a person that got to black belt and no one else could. He's the only person that has mastered the art of basketball in a way where he can change in an instance to be a completely different type of player. That's insane. And so when we studied this, we realized that we were giving big men shoes that were overbuilt, little men shoes that were underbuilt, because the flow of the game had changed. LeBron is like a motorcycle amongst cars, but we were overbuilding his product because he's a big guy. So this model pushed and it said, no, we need to innovate for their style of play, not their position. It's the same thing when you're building a culture in a company. So many of us get caught up in giving ourselves titles and positions, but how does your employee actually show up? What's their style of contribution? And can you manage to their style versus their title? Because titles do not equate to leadership. Leadership is a learned behavior. You can lead from the bottom and from the top. This fascination with giving ourselves titles and say that we're a leader, it's a fallacy. You have to learn how to be a leader. You can give yourself a title, but if you don't display the act of leadership, then you're just the person taking a walk. No one's following you, right? And so that's the thing in sports. We told ourselves we were industry leaders, but we weren't actually delivering value for our athletes the way we should. So instead of waiting on a perfect athlete to show up or the next Michael, I created them. So this is designed by that data. So everything from his texture of his hair to his tattoo selection to the school he went to, which is unfortunately Cal Berkeley, which is Stanford's rival. So you know it's not biased because I could have just made it Stanford. It was designed by data of what Michael would have become had he kept evolving in the game of basketball. So the project was named Predator, and the hypothesis was that if Michael was a predator in nature, predators always evolve to capture their prey. A lion will never be flipped around and be chased by a gazelle. It just won't happen. It's not the natural order of things. Michael will never be prey. And so we said, okay, he kept evolving. How would he physiologically change? And this is what Michael would evolve into. This guy who kind of looks like a mixture of J. Cole and somebody, and Ben Simmons, you know. So, and what was fascinating, this was done in 2011, and the athlete that actually fits his backstory and his physiological prowess is Ben Simmons. And so the whole time I presented this, the CEO and the board was like, man, we should recruit this guy. And I show him the final image. I'm like, I made him up. This is what the data told me, in addition to empathy and just observing the cultural shifts that were happening in our country. People were coming from other lands. They usually would play soccer. They fall in love with basketball. And then you see these cultures merge and create this character. So this is exactly what I mean by cultural alchemy put to use. It's data and insight and empathy to create a new muse. So that also helped me understand some of the inefficiencies of our business model. And the number one thing is that the product was built for athletes, not adolescents. The things we done at Nike, the things we do at Nike, it was adult product and we would shrink it down for children. And this is industry-wide practice. Very few companies actually innovate for the child themselves. They'll say, hey, you love this athlete, let's make a big version. Dad, you want your child to look cool. Mom, you want your child to look cool, get the little version. But there's so many inefficiencies with that because the body of a child is very different than the body of an adult. Would you give your children a Lamborghini to drive when they're 12? That's like putting them in an Air Jordan. They can't use the technology. Their body can't take advantage of it. And so I was pushing, like, how do we innovate from the ground up? How do they grow up to be athletes instead of just saying, wear this equipment? And honestly, it was a conversation that always would stall because the market was dictating where we would head. It was more advantageous for us to do the adult product, not the children's product. So rather than complaining about it, I studied it, and then I stepped out and started to address some of the most pressing issues, which is children ages 4 through 11 aren't playing enough. So when you think about the role of play, scientifically, it is the most important thing for us to protect. Children at this age have this thing called counterfactualism. What that means is they see the world for what it could be versus what it is. That's the whole concept of make-believe. But at the age of 7, it's a wild period. 3 years, 4 through 7 is the most creative we'll ever be in our lives. And then after that, you fall off. It's done. Because it's stripped out of us with modern education. The most creative moment in your life is 4 years old. NASA has a test that they give to astronauts, and on a creativity index, 4-year-olds outperform some of the smartest people on the planet because they have this ability to make believe. Make believe is a superpower that needs to be protected. These are the people who will innovate, who will solve problems that are very sticky and hairy, that will create cures for diseases because of how they think. So when we put children into categories, we rob ourselves of a future genius. And so what I focused on and what I'm focusing on is to not let this happen by enhancing the way that imagination is used and preserving counterfactualism through the archetype of a superhero. So my purpose is now to build stronger children instead of fixing broken adults. Health and wellness was all about fixing broken adults. Quit smoking, lose weight, feel good about yourself, but never really solve the problem because we need that reoccurring revenue. So play is a form of prevention. If you have a healthy play schema, you could prevent a lot of things that you see happening with the health of our children: mental health, emotional health, and physical health. And so our mission is very clear: to entertain, delight, and surprise every child in the world through interactive and imaginative physical play. We can't undo the digital age. Children will use the phone. As much as it hurts parents, you just have to get over it. Like, I have 2 kids. I live in the Silicon Valley. It sucks. But if we look at the phone as a window into a new world instead of a door that closes our children off, then we can use technology to help them instead of stigmatizing technology, because they're going to see it anyway. But you should be there to explain to them how to use it, not their peers. Because with my children, I tell them, listen, I don't know what's happening when you're at someone else's home. But I know when you're here, I'm teaching you how to navigate the internet, how to use this technology, how to say no to stuff. Because I can't outsource parenting to the education system, which is essentially what a lot of us do nowadays. We believe children go to school and they're going to play at school. They don't. Children learn how to communicate and share. They don't. Teachers are over-leveraged. So it has to be on private industry to protect a lot of the things that are naturally, expected to happen in a community or education system. Those aren't happening anymore. And so we created a multimodal system of play. So right here is where we are today, these two, gear and experiences. So footwear and apparel and different things that help that transformation from their regular self to their exemplar self. And then physical experiences where the kids can go out and display that they're little superheroes. And so you'll see a video in a second with what that means. And where we're headed in the future is a platform for play, being able to capture and house all the data of why play is important and give it back to the world. Because once again, no one has ever tried to measure the impact of play. So now as a company, these are things that would typically be funded through federal grants for the National Science Foundation. As a corporation, this is our core disposition in the market. So we have to understand how children are playing in order to serve them. And so what's cool about this is Batman played, once again, another role in my life where there was a study conducted by the National Institute of Health, and they gave two groups of children two different roles. One of the children would dress up as Batman. One of the kids wouldn't. They would measure the persistence and grit and determination to finish a task over time, and I think it was about a month-and-a-half period. And what they found is that children who dress up like Batman outperform children who didn't. And what that means is the fact that I'm in character, I hold myself to the standards of that character, to the ethics of that character. Batman helps people. Batman's on time. Batman is fearless. I have to be fearless. So we see this notion of role modeling playing out. Once again, people can only become what they see. So when we show up in the world, we have to be comfortable showing up in various ways because it signals to the youth a possible self. And so when your imagery is fixed, you start to believe that's all you can be. So if you look at our art direction, it's the reason why we don't show young women in positions of passivity. They're not damsels in distress waiting to be saved. They're the actual hero. It's the reason why you see young boys of color in a position of heroism. They're not a victim. They're not a villain. They're just a child at play. Because when they Google search themselves, that's what they believe they can be. Imagery and sound and what we put out into the world determines what we believe. That's the fundamental truth. So this study proved that we need to have more diverse role models, but also more diverse outcomes for our children. Because if you tell a child the only thing you could be is an athlete or an entertainer, and not that that's bad, but what about the doctors, the police officers, the science people, the researchers, the politicians? We need every single person to build a society, but we often subjugate our children to very narrow archetypes because it's profitable. So what we're trying to do is open the aperture of opportunity by showing people in different aspects. And what's really fun about this is in our research, what we found is there's no actual difference between how boys and girls play. That's a myth. That's an absolute myth. There's no difference between socioeconomic status or ethnicity. That's a myth. Children are just children, and they all play the same. The only difference is the resources they have to play. Some may have a PlayStation. Some may have a plastic bag that becomes a ball. But the reason why they play is all the same. It's about community and what they call sociodramatic play, meaning what I do in a group helps me feel better, helps me learn how to emote, helps me learn how to contribute to society. So this notion of playing tag and dodgeball teaches your kids how to be a responsible coworker 20 years later. It's a direct correlation between play and being a positive contributor to society. This isn't hearsay, this is scientifically proven. And what's fun about this is now we can say if you can play together, you can live together. If I can go to a playground right down the street and see a group of kids playing tag and they all look different, then why can't we have a group of people live together that all look different, having that same interaction and joy? So that's my mission, to get ahead of what we see in society by amplifying the power and inclusivity that comes with play. So we built product that physiologically fits how the child moves. So there's a reason why it doesn't have laces. Kids don't need laces. Laces are great for adults, because our bodies are, you decline the older you get. Like, I hate to say it, but it's true. And that part of the foot right here is called the navicular. Kids don't need laces right there. They just need containment. They don't need restricted movement. So we focused on what we call the utility strap. And this helps to keep the kid contained but not restricted. And so when you see the children in our advertisements, the cape is always present in some regard because we want them to believe they're the hero. So our imagery is all based on our research. Children Google superheroic, or they Google superheroic children, they'll see images that represent multiple shades of children, hair textures, everything. They'll be able to find themselves in the work that we do. Same thing with young women. I refuse to have my daughter only see princesses. I'm so fed up with that. It was something that was a tactic where they would say, shrink it and pink it. That's women's product, shrink it and pink it. And I'm like, nah, man. Like, my daughter is the best athlete on the playground. Like, all the boys refuse to pick her because she's better than them, and it's crazy. So how do you build and encourage her when she's saying, I can't play, football with the boys anymore, Dad, because they said I'm a girl? I'm like, you're 8. You shouldn't be told you can't play because of your gender at 8. It makes zero sense. So this is all intended to show girls are equally just as valuable in terms of play as boys are. And then we always show children together. That's the most important piece of it all, because play is a unifying activity. It's actually a spectator sport now. American Ninja Warrior proved it. So we try to bring that together and make it safe. I don't want any kid breaking their legs. We were recently awarded a Red Dot Design Award, which is a blessing for us and a dream come true, because I had this on my vision board in college. I wanted to be the first African American to win this award, and it happened with the product that I wanted to deliver to all of our children. So it's a tremendous honor to be able to now say that the work that we've done will be held in perpetuity in museums around the world, showing to people that you can address a very diverse market, underserved market demographic, which is children, with high design and quality. So the product and everything is memorialized. These are the images that we're allowed to show. But it's been really fun to see the reaction to it when people debate the way that they played when they were younger. That's always what comes up. Oh, we did this and we did that. And mind you, these are designers that are, I mean, they're world-class designers that are in museums. People I've studied, and they're arguing with me over the rules of tag. Like, well, in Spain, we played it this way. I'm like, in Chicago, we did this. But then we just play a game of tag, and you realize, like, man, all of us have that child inside of us that we just don't speak to enough. And so even with the fundamental kind of technology, the toe protection, this is built for the ultimate game of kickball or kicking your sibling, whichever one happens first. In my household, it's a combination of the two. So we only put protection where they need it. We don't overbuild anything. Everybody here who has children has argued or complained about them stepping on the heel of their shoes to remove them. That damages performance. So rather than shame the child, we put a natural ledge on the back. So if they step on it, they're stepping on the sole, not the actual heel counter. So we started to see the behavior change. Like, instead of fighting the system, just go with it. We knew children were going to do what they wanted because they're kids. So we gave them something to use to kick off their shoe. The traction is inspired by a mountain goat's hoof, which sounds funny. But if you understand environments, you'll realize that children go from grass to gravel to dirt to rock chips. But the footwear they wear is built for a controlled environment. They're wearing basketball shoes that are built for a clean wood floor with no dust. And then you send them out to the playground and expect them to perform. So this is built for variability and for how children move throughout their environment. And then our imagery reinforces that. Like, we want girls to be in a heroic pose just as much as we want boys to be in a playful pose. And then we often show little Easter egg images where we'll recreate famous comic book poses. And so I won't give away which ones they are, but we reference these little iconic moments that people subconsciously can relate to and say, oh, that feels familiar, because we want them to realize that they should see themselves in the work that we do. I mean, obviously none of us can float, but I just thought that was a cool image. But we try to be playful, but at the same time, we try to have that comic book type feel. All right, and with that, I say thank you. I think we have time for a couple questions. They said if you guys had any questions, I can answer any. Anyone?
Hey, Jason, before you went the VC route, did you ever think about leveraging kind of the platform you helped establish on Nike? Or even...
So the question was, did I use the resources of Nike to learn about the market demographic that I wanted to serve? Absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's entrepreneurship. So I started my first project, I created a lunchbox. And turned MJ into a cartoon character, and there was a pair of Air Jordan 1s that came inside of a lunchbox for kids. So I wanted to change the interaction between packaging and the child. So constant experiments, constant learning. The catalyst for me to leave the swoosh was because my son had gotten sick. And after traveling, being on the road for 3 weeks, being with millionaires who are famous and hearing them complain about which car didn't get delivered on time, then I come home and I'm like, nah, I need to put my gifts and talents to use in the area that really mattered to me, which is with my child. So I went back to Stanford and researched for about 3.5 years, gastrointestinal immunology. I needed to understand the relationship between the lower intestines and the brain and the overall function, because I didn't trust the medical system to heal my child, because that was why he got sick. And so we healed him through natural medicine and alternative medicine without having to have surgery. And then along the way, I realized I wanted to start a nonprofit. I tried. And I'm like, well, there's so much that I can do if I have a business that's sustainable and if I attack the biggest problem, the decline of play. Because childhood obesity and sickness and ADHD, all of that stuff are symptoms of a bigger problem. The biggest problem is lack of investment in infrastructure. We don't pour enough of our collective tax dollars into building up playgrounds and school systems. If you are fortunate to live in a good neighborhood, then you have access to these things. And even in those good neighborhoods, those children aren't playing enough because they're on the internet. And so for me, I wanted to attack the infrastructural problem by not giving the heavy-handed statistics, but just reminding people of the magic and joy that comes with play. Because you can't not smile when you see that video. But if I put up a bunch of statistics about children and obesity and Ritalin and Adderall, it's like, whoa, man, okay, I feel bad. Let me go home and hug my kid. And, so I want to use positivity to be a catalyst for change. So yeah, I studied. And I was very fortunate and blessed because Mr. Knight, the founder of Nike, and Mr. Jordan both paid for me to go to grad school at Stanford out of their own pocket. And they sent me out into the world with the very strict mission of doing my best work after Nike, not at Nike. And I refused to let them down. So.
Has anybody asked you about how to tie this into anti-bullying?
Yeah, yeah, a lot of people, a lot of people. Once again, I think we have a very interesting, I would say, challenge in the U.S., specifically North America, because the art of critical discourse isn't taught anymore. People don't know how to properly frame an argument, and so we just argue. So if I go towards bullying, the first thing they say, well, that kid and this kid, and once it doesn't solve the problem. So we solve the problem through play, because play has to be inclusive of all of us in order to make it work. So a lot of the things we put out is 2, 3, 4, 5 player games, and we teach kids positive conflict resolution through strategic trade-offs, because that's a lot of what bullying is. Hurting children hurt people. They've seen something at home, they feel denied, they feel invisible, so then they project that onto their peers. So by giving everyone a specific role in the play schema, no child feels like I have to take from someone else to get the attention, because every one of them will be good at something. So if you're not good and you saw those stickers at the end, right? So this is an analog test for something we're doing digitally. It's like badges in a video game. If you don't get the agility badge, you still can get the cognition badge. You can get the speed badge. So once you are known for something, you want to protect that value. So the reason why a lot of children bully is because they would rather be known as a bully than to be completely invisible. It's a direct reflection of the fact we do not see our children for who they are, but we see them for what we want them to be because of our own insecurities. We project our insecurities onto our children, whether we know it or not. And so rather than attack the bullying issue, I say this child isn't a bully, because when we label them a bully, they become a bully. I just say, you know what? You're a hero. You need to help this other kid. And here's how we're going to solve the problem. Because in that video, there was one child that would have been considered the bully at school. Towards the end, he became the most helpful person. I said, you know what? You're a bully, which means you're brave. Because for you to be a bully, you have to have a little bit of bravery, because you don't know the outcome. Like, not everybody is going to let you do that. Like, I had a bully. He learned very quickly that, oh, snap, martial arts work. Like, yeah, bro. Like, I may be little, but I still can throw hands. So, but the thing is I gave him an assignment. I said, you know what? You have to protect the line. Make sure that nobody leaves the line, because there's lava on each side of the line. You're the line protector. Protect them from the lava. He's like, wait, don't go in the lava. So we just repositioned him by giving him a different label, and he became that label. So the bullying thing is because we allow that label to be used in our children. Children aren't bullies. Children are an extension of their parents' insecurity. That's the part we need to acknowledge. So the parent may be hurt. Therefore, the child shows up in the world and projects themselves in the same way they see at home. So when we talk about bullying, the thing we haven't done is turn the mirror around on ourselves as parents. It's our fault, not the kids' fault. These are babies. So that's how I attack it. Last question. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I love the language that you use for everything. The new vocabulary.
Yeah, so the question is, how do we amplify our message with strategic partnerships and kind of societal impact that we're hoping to see? You nailed it right on the head. It's certain NGOs that we're partnering with that are fundamentally aligned with our mission, but more importantly, it's my end game. This company is a step towards me running for office someday for my city. I want to be mayor of Chicago. So in order to, because I don't just critique the people who are civil servants. Like, I understand that's a heavy role. So for me, I observe. And the cities of the future have to be led by people who have this entrepreneurship type mindset, because we're going to have to reinvent the way we live, the way we work. Automation is going to disrupt everything. And so in order to be prepared and to properly govern, I have to understand the industries that are being created through the Silicon Valley and other markets like New York, like Raleigh and Research Triangle Park. Like, all that stuff plays into how, cities will be ran and managed, and quite honestly, our country. So the reason why Super Roic is important is it allows me to touch education, the health system. It allows me to look at, where policy is being created to invest in infrastructure, to understand who the players are in the room and what motivates them and how we can collaborate and have a bipartisan approach to serving our children. Because everyone can agree children deserve to be protected. If you don't believe in that, then you should just exit left and just leave, right? And so that's the thing. Like, I'm leveraging this moment to learn how I can go back and be a civil servant in my city to help with the problems that are affecting children in every neighborhood in Chicago. So the partnerships we look at are generally national and have been, more established than we are. So someone like Kaboom, we're doing some work with them, which is a blessing. And then corporate partners who are looking for smaller businesses to accelerate. And that's the beauty of being a small business. Corporations look at you for having new data, new knowledge that they can't necessarily get. That authenticity is there. So when you talk about exposing your son and our impact, it really comes down to looking at 2 or 3 different websites. One, TechCrunch. The other is AngelList. .co, and that's so you can see all the jobs that are being created as a result of technology. Like when you go to these Silicon Valley only job sites, you can kind of see where the market's headed, and that way your son can be prepared for the future. And the other one is Mashable. You know, it's almost like the complex but of tech. And those are important because you may not get everything they say, but at least you're prepared by it. You're not shocked by it when you hear it and see it. And that helps us with our partnerships too, right? And how we structure it and how we go about communicating by showing up on these various platforms to learn how people may receive our business. Cool. Thank you, guys.